Welcome to the Business of Doing Science podcast, brought to you by Bagamian Scientific Consulting. On this podcast, we discuss different aspects of pursuing science-related careers and just how science is actually done beyond the bench. So stay tuned to find out more. Welcome to the Business of Doing Science. I'm Karun Bagamian, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Lindsay Leitner and Heidi Bolduc. On today's episode, we're thrilled to have Deborah Cooper with us to share her fascinating career journey, from being a neuroscientist to making an impact in health policy. Deborah, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
First of all, I'm just really excited to be on this podcast. So, a little bit about myself. I currently am an assistant secretary with the California Health and Human Services Agency. So, it's an agency in the executive branch of state government in California. And got here through kind of a windy path. I got my doctorate in neuroscience from Emory back in 2013. Did a short postdoc for about a year and a half and then transitioned into science policy with the California Council on Science and Technology, or CCST Policy Fellowship. That brought me out to Sacramento, California, where I planned on being for a year. I'm about to hit my 10-year mark here and have been working in the state, either legislature or executive branch or just state government for the last 10 years, doing all sorts of policy, a little bit of science policy work.
That's really exciting. Is this somewhere that you thought you would end up earlier in your education?
I'm not sure exactly. I know when I was in grad school, I started getting interested in science policy, not really even knowing what science policy was, but it was just something that was interesting to me. In our grad school, we had a lot of symposia or people or speakers that came in and would talk about careers outside of academia, and science policy was one of those that kind of spoke to me. So I did see myself moving in that direction. If you asked if I saw myself working in state government in California, I would say probably no. If anything, I probably thought I would see myself in DC or working on federal policy.
Yeah, how did the state opportunity come up?
So, when I was completing my doctorate, I was interested in the AAAS fellowship. That's a science policy fellowship in DC on the federal level. For that particular fellowship, you have to have already completed your doctorate in order to apply. I think the application period was in December, and I wasn't defending my dissertation until the next March. So, I couldn't apply. Um, and so the next period for application wouldn't be until the next year. So I had to do something in between. In that meantime is when I got my postdoc, which was in Texas. And during that time, I realized, let me do a few things to beef up my resume and figure out exactly what I want to do. And then not the following cycle, but the cycle after that, I was planning on applying for the AAAS fellowship. In the meantime, just through Google, I found the CCST fellowship and decided, let me just try this out and see what happens, and got that fellowship and just ended up in state government that way. Phenomenal.
Wow, it is really interesting. Yeah. I live in Gainesville now. I came here for a year and I'm still here 10 years
Yeah.
later as well. It's funny how that happens. So then you applied for that. Are there any skills that you learned during grad school or things that you went through that you think help you in your current job?
There's a few that we use. So like pipetting, obviously, I'm not using that skill, but communication in all forms, whether it's written communication, spoken communication, just being able to talk to people and talk about science. We go to conferences all the time in academia, but especially for me in the labs that I was in, we would go to junior highs and high schools and community events. Our research was focused around drug use. And so we would talk about drugs and dispel myths and talk about what drugs do to your brain and body to people who don't do science as their day to day life. And it's a different level of communication. And I really love that level of communication of explaining these more complex concepts to people who are, again, just not used to those technical words and everything. So learning how to communicate in that sort of way is a very useful skill. And I'd say the other is the analytical skills that we gain in looking at graphs and looking at data and determining what do the data say. That really comes out a lot, especially in government. People, whatever their interests are, whatever their motivation are, they're going to present data, they're going to present information, and they're going to present it as fact. And sometimes it's really easy to look through that and say, wait, those data don't look right. Or how did you get to this point or something? And just dive a little bit deeper instead of believing it at face value as they presented it. And there have been a number of times when that's really come in useful to just be able to look at a graph and say, something just seems off. This is not right.
That's really interesting that you had that much experience in outreach when you were doing your graduate degree. That was very different than my experience. So that's pretty cool that happened and it came in pretty handy, it sounds like.
Yes. I really enjoyed, honestly, my graduate experience, which I feel like is not always a sentiment that a lot of people say.
I would say I had an overall positive experience. I went to UCF for my master's and everyone was very helpful. I had an amazing mentor when I did my thesis, but I also know that's not
Yeah.
everyone's experience.
It's
So
definitely not everyone's experience. Yeah, the overall program, we had a lot of speakers coming in, but the outreach events that I would go to was my lab in particular was very big about that. And so different people in the lab would find events, our mentor would find events. Just between those experiences, it was great to just be exposed to a lot of different opportunities outside of just the lab setting.
Yeah, it probably gave you like a lot of the skills and just without even realizing it, because you're going out into the field essentially to talk to people, all different walks.
Different backgrounds, different levels of knowledge and understanding.
Very cool. I wish I had that.
I was also a part of the biomedical sciences graduate division that Deborah was a part of. We were in different programs. And I remember that they would do some of those events where they brought in outside speakers. And at the time, I thought that was a really good idea. And some people took the time to go and some didn't. I wish I actually went more, but I would be traveling a lot for my PhD. So too bad I didn't take more advantage of that. But I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I've been before, but not as many.
Yeah.
So have there been any challenges regarding your transition from research into policy?
I think one of the biggest challenges, honestly, was in research and academia, when you're trying to find the answer to something, you have plenty of time to do it. Like sometimes you might have a deadline to get the manuscript or to apply for the conference or whatever it is. But even then, your deadline is weeks, if not months down the line. So you have time to do a full literature search, read through all of the past literature, really highlight and do all the things and just take time with it and let it digest. In the policy world, when you have to answer a question, even if the question relies on data, you have to do it on a very fast timeline. Sometimes a matter of minutes, sometimes a matter of days, but you just don't get to do as deep of a dive into it. And so you have to get comfortable with I've found enough data to come to a conclusion, which is the complete opposite of what we've been taught in academia that you need to exhaust the background. And so it was definitely a hard transition to really find the confidence to say, okay, I have made an informed decision based on the information that I've gotten so far, and I just need to go with it and believe in it. It was really hard to get to that point. Now I'm a lot more confident in doing it, but I'd say that was definitely the hardest transition.
I think that's common for a lot of jobs outside of academia because what I do is similar to what I used to do, but I still have to do it a lot faster and same thing. And over time, I feel like you said you get confidence in your ability to do that. And I feel like people that work at companies or an industry, sometimes that turnaround's even more rapid, probably more comparable to what you go through in policy, I imagine.
Yeah.
But that's such a good point. I've never thought about that before.
I'm like 70% sure, which is totally fine. But for coming from an academic background, you're like, no, I know nothing. I can't
Right.
say like yes to that.
What about the other 25%? I need
Yeah, and it's like
yeah, I know what you're saying because prior to COVID, I worked in a hotel and my manager at some point after the first few months of working there was my first hospitality job. And she had to pull me aside and be like, it's great that you're taking all of this extra time on these extra tasks to check everything. and make sure, 100% sure that it's like right, but we need to focus more on getting it done quickly. So she was pretty much telling me what you said. Get the job like 80, 90% done, make your decision, submit your order, whatever task you're doing. And if you make a small mistake, whatever, no one will notice.
Confidence is key. I'm taking notes, by the way.
It's not like when you're getting a grant review or like in a grant review, they see a typo and get mad or something.
right.
Like, it's not like that in this.
No, there's no reviewer number 3.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. I was used to, like you guys said, in grad school, like doing these papers, and people would point out, like, oh, you didn't consult this literature, you didn't look at that aspect of it. And then it's like, well, in the real world, you got an overview of it, and that's good enough, and let's go and move on.
Exactly.
So what are the things that you've been able to do over the course of your current job? Just tell us a little bit about it so we get an idea.
My current job, again, I work with the California Health and Human Services Agency. Just to lay out exactly how this agency works in state government. So the agency itself directly reports to the governor. And then under our agency are several different departments that deliver services related to health and human services. For instance, the Department of Healthcare Services and the Department of Public Health are more on the health side of things. And then the Department of Social Services, which covers, for instance, the California version of food stamps and the California version of welfare and foster care, as well as the Department of Developmental Services, providing services for people who have developmental issues. And I'll just, as an aside, California is the only state in the country where people who have who obtain those disabilities before they turn 18 are entitled to services throughout the entirety of their life. And it's a really amazing department and program, and being that other states do deliver services to people with developmental disabilities, but California is the only one where you are entitled to those services for the rest of your life. So all of those departments and a few others are under the umbrella of the Health and Human Services Agency. And so we essentially oversee these departments and different ways for looking at policies, the policies that affect them, their budgetary asks, the implementation of laws that have passed, etc. And for my particular role, I work on a little bit more of the budget side of things. And so I like to think of myself as a liaison with the agencies. I'm a liaison between myself and some of the departments that are under my portfolio. I'm a liaison between the departments and our Department of Finance, basically saying, hey, we'd like money for these programs. I'm a liaison also between us and the legislature, because the legislature ultimately helps the bills go through and the budget as well. And I'm a liaison also between us and the governor's office. So making sure that everybody is aligned with the ultimate direction of the state administration, the state government. And so I help connect all of these different points between our agency and these different departments and different entities. And especially, again, looking at the budgetary side, a little bit of the policy side too, but mostly the budgetary side, and saying that we need these dollars to help do these certain programs, and these are the reasons why, and this is what these programs will do, how they will help people, how we can improve people's lives, etc. It's really fascinating. I work with a few different departments under our agency, one of which I mentioned before, the Department of Developmental Services is under my portfolio, and a few others. That's a general broad overview of what my current job is.
It sounds like a really interesting one, very different than any of my experiences. So that sounds really exciting, especially getting to be in that position where you get to interact with so many different groups and ideally help them get where they need to get to. That's great. Which of your personality traits or skills or whatever just do you think have come in to play that have made you successful at your job?
I am very, very much an introvert.
Interesting.
And the job that I'm in is a very much extroverted job.
That is so interesting.
It's a lot of talking to people, connecting people, a lot of meetings, a lot of just like making sure everyone's on the same page and pulling people together. And it's really interesting just over time, I have my work self and my out of work self. And my work self is a lot more extroverted and I just do the things I need to do, get the job done. And then at the end of the day, when I'm done, I'll go back into introvert mode. But I think it's being charismatic because again, I have to talk to people all day long. I have to connect people and being able to talk to people in a way that you can talk to their personality as you're talking about budget and everything, but you can still connect with people in that sort of way. And that works on both my introverted and extroverted side of just being able to just be charismatic and personable and understand how to pull together those complex topics and see the real life and humanity in it. Because even if I'm talking about crunching numbers for how much budget we need at the end of the day, it's because of actual people's lives. And so being able to make that connection and really just if I'm talking to you and I'm personable and caring about you, I can explain how I'm also caring about all these other people that I'm asking these budget asks for.
Was that a hard part to adjust to that? Is there any advice you can give to somebody that might be facing a similar thing? We've actually had one of our previous guests who she's a leader and she's an introvert, but she says that now they say introverts can be some of the best leaders. The world is built around extroverts, but introverts can lead in their own ways and in different ways and also succeed and learn the things that need to be learned to relate to people. It sounds like you have. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It reminds me of this book that I read before. It's called Quiet, and there's a subtitle. It's something like Introverts Living in an Extroverted World. And it really speaks a lot to introverts. Like you said, we live in an extroverts world. And a lot of the book spoke to how valuable introverts are. And I think it's very validating for people who are introverts, but also I think a lot of people who are extroverts should also read this book and see how introverts fit in the world. Not even you don't have to be the loudest person in the room, you don't have to be the center of attention, but we all bring value. I think it took me time to come to that realization that even if I'm not the loudest in the room, even if I'm not the one that's always speaking, when I do speak, I am going to say something profound. I find my moment, I take my observations, and I can open the space for others. So like I said, I'm a liaison. I connect people. I can do that part in connecting and give space to others to hash things out. And when things need to be summarized or pulled back together, since I've been doing observation in the back quietly, at that point, I can come forward again and say, let's summarize what we just talked about. So I don't have to always be the center, the main one speaking, or the loudest voice in the room, but I can still get everything done just by really pulling people in. And once you can get over that, you can do all of the others. It also reminds me of something since I came in with the CCST fellowship. And so this fellowship brings in PhD level scientists across the board. So we're all there making the same transition at the same time. And one of the things that we always talk about is not being afraid to pick up the phone and jokingly, but meaning that like when we're in the academic setting and we have a question, first thing we do is just try and figure out, okay, I know I can figure this out. I know how to do this. And in this world, the best thing to do is pick up the phone because if I have that question, I know somebody who already has the answer. So I literally just need to pick up the phone and ask them, hey, I have this question and figure that out. And I think for a lot of us, unfortunately, it was a hump that we had to overcome to literally just pick up the phone and call somebody just to ask a simple question. And I think getting over that hump is one of the few steps of being able to overcome, or I don't even want to say overcome, but just work with my introverted personality and make it work for me.
That's such a good point. Yeah, because I know I would always try to solve everything myself. And then I had friends that in grad school were more outspoken or would be reaching out to people. Now, advocate for that a lot when people are looking for jobs. We've talked about it in previous podcasts too, but it's the same thing, right? And even in your job or what you're doing, you can also get solutions by just talking to people or knowing the right person to talk to. But yeah, it can be really scary to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Definitely. And I think for a lot of academics specifically, you're afraid to a certain extent of being perceived as someone that doesn't know or hasn't done the research, or you're very vulnerable.
Exactly. Yeah.
At least I'm just thinking of myself right now in the moment. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be such a vulnerable state to be in. But at the same time, when you're doing the work that you do, where you have to be very quick
Yeah.
and you need to work with all these people, and yeah, I mean, you should be leaning on those that have the answers and move fast instead of trying to figure it all out yourself.
Exactly. I think in grad school and academia, we are supposed to be the experts in our field. When you don't know something, it almost feels like a failure because you're not the expert. Versus in the policy world, we're all a bunch of generalists. Yeah, some people know a lot about a few things, but most of us, we're just generalists. The environment is a lot more comfortable to just pick up the phone and ask somebody else who does know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I've seen in the workforce in general too, is that exactly like Lindsay said, oh man, I don't want to be perceived as that new person that's bothering everybody, because at that point you haven't figured out who is the best person to ask the questions to. So I think that is like a learning curve, but I like how you brought it back to grad school, because the reality is in grad school, you are supposed to be super self-sufficient.
What does your typical workday look like?
Typical work day is meetings, lots of meetings. I have standing meetings, some that are weekly, some that are biweekly, some that are monthly. So those are whatever the topic is with whichever groups, going through those. And then there's the random one off meetings. There's a topic that came up and we need to discuss this right now and find a solution for it. And then meetings that are, because again, we're the umbrella agency for a lot of departments. Sometimes there are issues that cross over multiple departments. And so having a meeting that pulls together multiple departments to talk about that issue and get through it. And then when it's what we call budget season, which is when we're developing the budget and kind of getting through and negotiating the budget, there's lots of meetings on going back and forth on negotiation of the budget. So it's literally just meetings all day, some that are planned and some that are spontaneous. And then because essentially I work for the governor or work for the secretary of our agency, if something comes up that is of importance to the secretary or to the governor, then that is the issue that is being worked on, and then move on to the other tasks at hand.
So then you take some definite special time after work to recharge your batteries,
Yes.
probably. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Do you think that there's like a particular degree or educational trajectory or anything that would be a good fit to get to where you went? I know that your path was a little bit different maybe, but if someone knew they wanted to do this, what advice would you give them along those lines?
The job that I have, there's no one particular path. Yes, I did the biomedical doctorate and got here that way. I don't think that's a necessary path. If you look at my colleagues, we all have widely varying backgrounds. Some are public policy, some do have a scientific background or psychology background. I think ultimately, more so than your academic background, is really your passion about the work. Again, working in health and human services, ultimately, all we are doing is helping people's lives. So whether it is the health of your actual person, or if it's the social determinants of health that help you, if your lights are on and you have food on your table, then you can worry about that cough. Ultimately, we provide services that help people. And so having the passion to really help the most vulnerable people in our state is more important than any of the academic degrees, I could say.
That's actually really cool because a lot of people want to do things to help people, right? And there might be jobs that aren't even on their radar to think about that. This might be something people might not be aware of. Is there any advice that you would give someone that would be interested in doing this type of work?
There's a lot of different ways to get into state government. I did a fellowship. There are lots of different types of fellowships for people with different sorts of backgrounds. A fellowship is one of the easiest ways to get into state government work. But honestly, a lot of people who are in state government have been in there for 20 plus years and they just started at the bottom and work your way up. And it's definitely one of those sorts of jobs where you can work your way up the ladder or start in the middle of the ladder and work your way up. There's a lot of opportunity for job growth. So I think just especially if you're looking at the executive branch of government, there's a department for any one of your interests, whether it's science, whether it's something outside of science, there is a department that is working on that particular interest. So just start there and see what openings they have there and work your way on up.
Great. That sounds like great advice. That's exciting. There's a lot of different ways to get there. So that's really cool. Is there anything you would have done differently?
That's a good question. I'm not sure there is anything I would have done differently. My path has been so zigzaggy, and there have been times and opportunities that I've had in my path that initially I was like, I have no interest in doing this. Why would I do this? And then ended up doing it, and loved it, and it added to the path. For instance, when I first came to state government, I was with the legislature. That's where I was placed with the CCST fellowship and then got hired on into the state senate. After my first job in the state senate, I was approached to work in the Senate Appropriations Committee. And the way I describe that committee is basically if a bill were to become a law, we do the analysis on how much would that cost the state. And when I was approached for that, my initial thought was, I don't want to work on fiscal analyses. That does not seem interesting at all. And I kind of just pushed it off. And then another person approached me about it, and then who would become my eventual boss emailed me and was like, "Hey, do you want to grab coffee and just talk about this position?" And I was like, "At this point, I'm just going to talk, have the coffee, and nothing's going to go from it." And then in sitting down and having that meeting with him, I was like, "Oh, this actually really is an interesting opportunity and a really interesting job." And so I applied for it and got it. My main assignment in that position was working on human services, and it's really helped my trajectory through navigating a few different opportunities within human services and now at the Health and Human Services Agency. I think initially, I was all about, I'm not interested in this. I don't want to do it. And then did it, loved it. I don't think I would change anything because all the things really brought me to here.
Yeah, it's interesting. All those steps along the way. I know that a lot of times you apply for a job, you have an instinct, or you end up in a job that you aren't sure about, but they all bring something to it. And it's really interesting that something that you ended up loving, you weren't like so sure about that.
It's like the saying that it's a journey, not the destination.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
to just be open minded because you just never know. Like you went and had coffee and then got a deeper perspective and were like, oh, actually, this could be interesting. I wasn't initially interested, but now maybe I could be. And you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
What do you think is next for you?
That's a hard question. I would say, again, I mentioned that I've been working in human services almost for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy human services because, like I said, it deals with the social determinants of health. It is all of those things that if we can take care of these things, people can focus a little bit more on their health. And addressing some of those issues directly lead to better health outcomes. So I really enjoy it for that perspective. But having a degree in biomedical sciences, I do want to work a little bit more on the direct health side of things. Whatever is next, I don't know what that looks like. I would like for it to maybe be on the health side of things rather than the human services side of things.
maybe the NIH.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there. I've thought about lobbying. I've thought about
Cool.
advocacy in different realms. So I don't know what's out there, but I'm taking it as it comes. I think there was a shift in my perspective maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think up until that point, throughout my life from high school, college, everything, it was like always working for the next thing. It was like, okay, I got into college. Now I got to get through college. Okay, what am I doing next? I got into grad school, got my doctorate. What am I doing next? Postdoc, everything. It was like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And then maybe about finally 2 positions into working in the government, I was finally like, I enjoy what I'm doing. I don't know that this is what I'm going to be doing for forever, but I'm not actively looking for the next thing. I'm just enjoying this until this season passes. And that's how I've been for the last couple of positions that I've had. I enjoy this for the time being. I'm not racing and running for the next thing. When it presents itself, it will present itself. Or if I change my perspective and I get to the point where I do need the next thing. But it's a really great position to be in to where I like what I'm doing now. And at some time that may change, but I'm just writing it out for now.
I love that. I love that outlook.
I love that.
Something that I've been embracing more lately myself. In my case, like within the business, I would push myself in a lot of different directions. And now I'm like, you know what? These directions are enough. Enjoying the ride and enjoying where you're at.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do. especially when you're achievement oriented, or I think that the world
Definitely.
is telling you should always be thinking about the next thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
It
Great.
seems also like your position, you have some balance. You feel like
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of really great things, helping so many people.
And then, like I said, even though I don't work directly on health policy, because it is a health and human service agency, some of my issue areas overlap with the more health focused issue areas from time to time. So, like,
Yeah.
I get to dabble in health policy from time to time. And I think that scratches the itch that I have for the time being, too.
I imagine, given your job and given that you're providing justification for all of these programs, for the money for them, that you probably have to either tell people no a lot or just deliver bad news a lot. So I was going to ask if you had any tips on anything you learned with making like delivering bad news easier.
Oh,
That's a good question.
oh gosh. Yeah, I do have to deliver bad news. Unfortunately, I don't think I have tips for delivering it more easily or like softening the blow.
Or maybe if you could just speak to that, talk about how that impacts your current role, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do have to deliver bad news from time to time, especially if we're in a bad budgetary situation, then we can't do a lot of big programs that would be very awesome and would help a lot of people out, or we can't expand programs that we already have going on. And so it's a really hard blow. There is some negotiation too. So sometimes when we get the bad news, it's like, well, is there anything we can do? And then we try and talk about it and see if we can push back or negotiate or anything. It is fun a little bit to do that. It doesn't always work out. And so it's a second blow when you try for a push and it doesn't work out. But it's also the understanding and the realization with policy and with government sometimes that that blow hurts, that difficult discussion or difficult decision, it hurts in the moment. But then you have to sit back and just like brainstorm again and problem solve. Okay, if this is what we have, this is what we're going to do, is the first thing that we do is just figure out, okay, this is the situation. Let's figure out how to roll with it. And the second part is it did not work this time, but it might work next time. It may not work in this fiscal year, but it may work next fiscal year. It may work the fiscal year after that. So just because it's a no right now in policy, it can be a yes later. And it might just be we need to figure out how to finesse the ask a little bit or just wait for the right time. So it hurts in the moment, but in the long run, there's still opportunity. And it's really just focusing on the long term opportunity.
So it sounds like it's a lot about
Mhm.
compromise. And then, like you said, if you still can't even reach a compromise, then I imagine that there's different levels of priority. And maybe next year the project is like a bigger
Exactly.
priority.
Yeah. And then new things come up and just the environment changes in some sort of way and the priorities change, or you figure out a way to do it in a different way that doesn't use as many resources. It's a lot of creative thinking that comes into it. So you just have to sit with the initial disappointment and then let the creative juices flow after that.
I like that though. I bet you that a lot of those kind of problem solving skills and strategic thinking skills from
Oh,
grad
yeah.
school become helpful with that because
Absolutely.
you have to make something out of nothing, which you're also doing a lot in grad
Yeah.
school.
Yeah,
Yep, for
solving
sure.
problems over and over again. Yeah.
And last but not least, we like to ask our guests to choose 3 people, current or in history, that you would love to have a beer, a coffee,
Ooh.
whatever your drink of choice is.
Well, I got my first answer right away. First answer would be Mae Jemison, Dr. Mae Jemison, I should say. She is an astronaut. She is the first, I believe, first Black female astronaut. Also a ballet dancer. Also was on Star Trek.
All around super.
Super talented.
Yeah.
Multi-talented.
Right. Definitely want to sit down and just have coffee, beer with her and just talk about her experiences. She was a role model from when I was a little girl. Um, and then I think the other two would be, and I'm going to say them together, even though they're totally separate, but Zora Neale Hurston and Nina Simone. And the reason for that is both of those women, I used their names to help name my daughter. So my daughter's name is Zora
Aw.
Simone. And I would love to sit down with them and talk to them. They've been an inspiration enough for me to name my daughter after them.
That's amazing.
I love
It's
that.
cool. We haven't had any of those.
All good, all good
Yeah.
choices.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
I'm familiar
No
with all, but
repeats.
I didn't know Mandy was in Star Trek. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
she was in
I'm
one
like-
episode, I believe, but
Talk about like
She's a triple threat.
yeah, dimensional triple threat on all levels.
Yeah, people that are like that, it's so impressive to get to basically the
Yeah.
top of a career or the top of your sport or hobby or
Right.
whatever it is in like more than one. Because first of all, most people don't even do it within one
Yeah.
right.
thing. So to get to the top of 2 or 3 things, it's wow.
It's like if only I could be that talented, but
Right.
No, I think they have a festival in Orlando or somewhere near Orlando for Zora Neale Hurston,
Yeah.
I believe.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if she was born somewhere near
Yeah.
here. Because I remember seeing like signs at the UCF library like every year, and it was like a book related festival. Yeah.
I love reading. I have a book club too. Maybe my daughter and I will take a trip out to Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a very important local author. She's not only lived in Florida, but she has it several times in her life, I believe. Yeah. Recently, one of our bookstores featured one of her books as a Florida author selection.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it was actually the collection of short stories. So it's not just contemporary authors they were doing. So that was
That's
pretty cool.
Very cool.
All right. Deborah, thank you so much for this. This was an amazing podcast episode, and we learned so much from you and learned about something that I don't think a lot of people think about,
Yeah.
especially with a science background. Even better, it could be for people with other backgrounds. So
Right,
that's
yeah.
great. Yeah. With the right passions.
Yeah, no, this was very fun. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting me on. It was great.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the Business of Doing Science podcast. For more information on our guests and access to career development resources, please click on the link to our website below. And remember, you can also visit the website to learn more about how Bagamian Sci can help you do science.